The Fed is panicking right now as news continues to get worse for both the housing market and the economy as a whole. Now, house prices have actually temporarily stabilized for the moment, as these houses are really the houses that were put under contract back in August when interest rates were back in the 5% range. So the worst is unfortunately yet to come as we enter into this second phase of the housing crash. You see, unemployment levels are back down again, and I'll explain why that's not a good thing for the housing market. In addition to that, we have gas prices that are about to go a lot higher very soon, which is going to affect total inflation levels, which will translate to a lot more pain coming for the housing market. We're also seeing price drops surge across the nation as buyer demand is going out the window, and we're essentially seeing homes sit on the market a lot longer. So lots to talk about in today's video, but before we get started, do me a favor and support the channel by smashing that like button, and if you haven't already done so, definitely subscribe and hit that notification bell to watch more content like this. And with that said, let's jump into it. The future outlook of the housing market and the economy continue to get worse and worse, and that has the Fed very concerned about the future. You see, inflation is a serious ongoing problem right now, and the reason I even bring up inflation when this video is supposed to be about the housing market is inflation is at the center of it all when it comes to house prices declining and when it comes to home buyers leaving the market. It's essentially the most important metric to keep your eyes on if you want to get an insight into the future of the housing market. Now, the biggest thing that's about to keep inflation levels high is gas prices. You see, gas prices are about to go up drastically in these coming months ahead. For starters, we have OPEC that just announced they're going to be cutting down their oil production by 2 million barrels of oil per day, which is a big deal because obviously supply and demand dynamics also apply when it comes to oil prices. And so when you have less supply coming in the market for oil, you're going to see oil prices continue to go up. And that's exactly what we're seeing happen with US oil supply. Now, that's not the only bad news. Unfortunately, the Biden administration up until this point has been releasing 1 million barrels a day from our strategic petroleum reserves in order to artificially help the average American out by bringing down gas prices. Well, that completely stops at the end of October, and that again is going to provide more upward inflationary pressure on gas prices. So that's two major things taking place that's going to contribute to higher gas prices starting in the month of November, and you can only imagine what that's going to mean for the total inflation numbers. You see, not only is gas a problem, but like I've talked about in other recent videos, we have things like student loan debt forgiveness that hasn't officially gone into effect yet. We have owner's equivalent rent, which is basically lagging the true rental numbers. So we're seeing that the government statistics for rent is going up month over month to catch up to that. All of this plays a role in the total inflation numbers continuing to be a problem for the Federal Reserve. Now, again, in a nutshell, the reason we even care about inflation is as long as inflation is a problem, we're going to continue to see the Federal Reserve continue to hike interest rates, continue to offload their balance sheet, and all that will contribute to mortgage rates continuing to go up. The more that mortgage rates rise, the more we continue to see housing affordability plummet for the average American, and so buying demand continues to go down, which causes house prices to continue to decline and correct to those new affordability levels. Now, it's important to understand that inflation is the Fed's #1 priority because inflation being high affects the average American. Everybody in America feels high inflation. Now, normal levels of inflation are typically at around 2% per year, and so that's why the Federal Reserve has said publicly that they're going to continue to stay aggressive, continue the rate hikes and all of that until we can get inflation levels down to those 2% levels, which would be considered normal. Well, right now we're currently at 8.3% for total inflation numbers, but we were as high as over 9%. Now, even though we have seen a slight decline, like I mentioned, there is a lot of upcoming events taking place that is going to provide more upward inflationary pressure, which makes for a long road ahead for the Federal Reserve. And ultimately, that leads to a lot more pain on the way for the housing market. So with that said, mortgage rates are currently still sitting at those 7% levels, which are the highest levels we've really seen for mortgage rates since the year 2000. $2,000 in the month of December. Now you combine that with house prices still being near all-time high levels, and you have the most unaffordable housing market we've seen really in over 38 years according to Black Knight. Black Knight went on to say that based on 6.7% mortgage rates, which is a little lower than where they're actually at now, we would be looking at 38.2% of a median household income in order to afford a median priced home. Now you have to understand that that is the largest share of income that's been required for a median priced home since December of 1984. Not to mention that we're not at 6.7% anymore, we're now over 7% rates, and what if we end up getting to those 8% levels? You see, these low housing affordability levels are continuing to cause buyer demand to plummet, and we saw evidence of that when Mortgage Bankers Association recently reported that buying demand or purchase applications are actually down 13% week over week and over 37% year over year. Now you do need to know that that is partly due to Hurricane Ian in Florida taking place, which has caused buying demand to plummet just in Florida alone 31% week over week. So that has had an effect, but in general we are seeing the numbers of buying demand continue to go down drastically. In fact, we've already seen it affect house prices, as we saw back in the month of June when mortgage rates started to go up into the 6s. That had an effect on the homes that closed in July and August, as those homes showed the fastest single month declines since the month of January 2009 according to Black Knight, and those numbers actually started to rival the numbers they saw in the Great Recession of 2008. Now at the same time, Redfin has a little bit more up-to-date information when it comes to home prices, and what we're seeing on a 4-week rolling average is that home prices have actually started to stabilize as of lately. Now that might look on one hand like maybe we're done with this housing market correction, but if you really look closely at it, this is for the period of September 5th to October 2nd, and what we know about the homes that closed in that period of time is those were the homes that likely went under contract in July and August, and during the months of July and August we saw mortgage rates drop drastically into the very low 5s, as low as 5.05%. So naturally we would have expected to see more competition for houses during those months. So I'm not really looking too much into that data, because really if we want to get the accurate data reflecting these new 7% mortgage rates and how that's affecting home prices, we're not going to get that information really until we get November's data. Now because we're seeing housing affordability so low right now, that is affecting how long the homes stay on the market. We're seeing the median days on market continue to go up, as we saw it go up to 32 median days on market nationwide. That's up another day from last week, and it's up from 16 days on market earlier in the year. Now when homes sit on the market longer, we're naturally also going to see price drops take place, and they have been surging as of recently. We've recently made some new highs in this cycle, finally at the 7.7% levels in weekly numbers. You multiply that by 4, and we're roughly at about 31% of all listings nationwide are seeing a price drop take place. We're also continuing to see a consistent trend take place of housing transactions go down, as we saw the number of homes sold down over 20.8% year over year, but the more alarming statistic to take a look at is pending sales. You see, with pending sales, we get to look into the future of what home sales are probably going to look like. Now, pending sales came back with the worst numbers we've seen really since a 3-week period during the pandemic when it just started, and pending sales is down as much as 27.5% year over year. This is obviously due to buyer demand continuing to go down, with these housing affordability levels continuing to be a problem, but we go back to this issue that I talked about in previous videos recently about this ongoing battle of supply versus demand. Now we've talked about how new listings have been declining at the same time that we've been seeing buyer demand go down, and new listings going down typically has an effect on prices going up, whereas buyer demand going down has an effect on prices going down. So when they're going down, they're kind of doing the opposite thing. Well, as of the latest data, new listings has continued to go down, currently down 18.8% year over year. We've also seen active listings continue to go down. That's just the total number of inventory that is on the market. Now, it's important to not get confused between active inventory and months of supply, because months of supply is basically a better formula to determine supply versus demand. You see, months of supply is effectively your active inventory divided by the number of homes closed in the last month. And so that gives you a better idea of your total supply versus demand dynamics. And so what we saw this last week week is months of supply actually went up from 3 months last week up to 3.2 months this week, which is a pretty rapid increase in just a 1 week period. Now, these are the highest levels we've seen since July 2020. It is technically still a seller's market with that number, but with the way it's shifting so fast, it feels like a buyer's market with the way that buyers have room to negotiate prices right now. Technically, a balanced market is between 4 to 6 months, but we are rising very fast with months of supply at this point, and eventually that's going to have an effect on house prices if that continues to go up. Now, the only thing that can speed this up is if the economy starts to get worse and we start to enter an economic recession. Well, we recently got some data back this last week to reflect what is going on with the economy. So the unemployment rate came back at 3.5%, and that was a much better number than expected. Last month we were at 3.7%. Expectations are we would stay even at that 3.7%. So coming in at 3.5% shows that we're actually getting better. Now, although that's good news, it's really bad news because the Federal Reserve wants to see those numbers go higher in order to fight inflation. You see, Larry Summers, who used to be the Secretary of the Treasury, he said that we should have to aim for 6% unemployment in order to truly fight this inflation. So when unemployment rates are going down like this, that's not a good thing. It could be a sign that we need to get even more aggressive for a longer period of time in order to achieve what we need to achieve. We also saw that the number of jobs created this last month was 263,000, which was better than expected at 250,000. And again, this is a situation of good news is bad news because we really want to induce this economic recession to get it over with, get inflation taken care of as fast as possible so we can just move on and get back to the boom cycle again. As long as we continue to see the economy doing well, we will continue to have problems fighting inflation, which in turn will lead to a longer period of time that we have to deal with this aggressive monetary policy of the Federal Reserve, and that means more pain ahead for the housing market. So with that said, I'm going to keep you guys updated with what is going on with the housing market, and next week we have a very important week as we get the inflation numbers for the month of September, so keep an eye out for that. I'll keep you guys updated. But with that said, if you guys enjoyed today's video and you gained some value from it, do me a favor, support the channel by smashing that like button, and if you haven't already done so, definitely subscribe and hit that notification bell to watch more content like this. Also, let me know your thoughts or questions in the comments below and I'll do my best to get back to you. Finally, follow me on Instagram and TikTok at The Out of State Investor, and if you enjoyed today's video, I'm going to highly recommend checking out one of these two videos over here. And with that said, I'll see you guys on the next one.